So welcome back. So in this video, what we're going to talk about is how to find the larger of the two numbers using simple ifs. And again, you're going to collect two numbers from the users and find out a larger of the two numbers. So it seems straightforward and simple, but yet we're going to write these steps in plain English. So always make it a habit, because as you start handling programs that are a bit more complex and that uses something called nested if condition that we're going to talk about later, these techniques come in very handy. What is the technique? Writing these steps in plain English. Remember, you're going to give a bunch of instructions to the computer to solve a problem, right? So write these instructions instead of saying the steps. Let me use the word instructions in plain English. And then once you write these instructions, and then you're going to translate these instructions into instructions using Python. So when you write these instructions, always make sure the instructions make use of these cells, right? So these instructions is basically, it's a plan. This is your plan. Remember, before you build anything, you have to have a plan. If you're going to build a house, you got to have a plan. You're going to build a car, you got to have a plan, right? If you're going to design anything, you're going to construct anything, you got to have a plan. So if you have been programming maybe 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, that do I need to do this planning for simple programs? No, because it becomes your second nature. But if you're a beginner to this programming, it is always a good habit to start with, to come up with a plan in plain English. And after you do this for a year or two, it becomes your second nature. So you don't have to write down these plans in plain English for simple problems. But I suggest, if you're a beginner, always come up with these instructions in plain English. Basically, that is your plan. So now what I want to do, my plan should always include the cell numbers, cells, basically memory cells, also called variables. So my plan is, I want to collect the first number from the user, and I want to put it in this cell here, right? I want to take a number from the user, I want to put it in this cell, and I want to take another number from the user, I want to put it in this cell. And once I collect the two numbers, I want to compare what is in this cell with what is in this cell. If whatever is here is bigger than whatever is here, then I will display whatever is in here. Okay, that's one thing. Or whatever is here is bigger than whatever is here, then I will say that whatever is here is bigger. And there's always a third possibility. Whatever is here could be the same as whatever is here. So there's three possibilities. One is that this cell is bigger than the other one. Other possibility is that this cell is bigger than this one. And the third possibility is that both cells are equal. So that's what I'm writing in plain English here. So if I look over here, so I'm going to take a number from the user and put it in a cell called number 1. So this is my cell, number 1. And then the next instruction says, take another number from the user and put it in a cell called number 2. That is that cell. Then the next instruction in plain English is, compare these two cells, right? If the cell number 1 is bigger than cell number 2, that means what I'm telling here is, basically I'm saying what is in this cell is bigger than what is in this cell. Then display the contents of the cell number 1. You want to say that if this is bigger than this guy, then say this is bigger. If this guy is bigger than this guy, then you will say this is bigger. And that's what the second instruction is doing here. If the cell number 2 is bigger than cell number 1, then display that the contents of the cell number 2 is bigger. And the third possibility here is, if the cell number 1 is the same as cell number 2, then display the contents of the cell are equal. So these are the steps in plain English. Now, always start with that, and then translate these steps in plain English into Python, right? So that is the step in plain English. Now, when I translate that into Python, it looks like this. And the second step instruction says, take another number from the user, put it in a cell called number 2. When I translate that into Python, it will look like this. And then compare two cells. And then you are saying, if the cell number 1 is bigger than cell number 2, then you want to display that the contents of this cell number 1 is bigger. So here, that's what you're doing. If number 1 is bigger than number 2, then you are saying the larger number is number 1. So we're done with this, right? We have translated this into Python. Next, you need to translate these instructions into Python. And these instructions says, if the cell number 2 is bigger than cell number 1. So here I'm saying, this is how I have translated. If the cell number 2 is bigger than cell number 1, then you display the message, the larger number is number 2. And the third possibility, if the cell number 1, if the contents of the cell number 1 is same as cell number 2, then you display. You're comparing the two cells, you're saying if they are equal. And to check to see if the two cells are equal, you need to use this double equal sign. That's what you need to do in Python and Java and C++ and many other languages. If that is the case, if both are equal, then you display this message. So again, we learned a few things here. One is we are comparing one cell with another cell. Remember, I think in previous example, we compared something like this, something like that, right? In that example, where you are comparing a numeric variable with a numeric constant. Whereas in this case, we are comparing the contents of this cell, memory cell, with the contents of that memory cell. And if the content of number 1 memory cell is bigger than number 2, then we display that message. If the content of number 2 is bigger than the contents of number 1, we display this message. If the contents of number 1 is same as content of number 2, then we display this message. So here, I'm going to quickly run this program. As you see, always test your program a few times to make sure that it is working. So I'm going to stop all of these. So I will put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to, let me run this program once so that, okay, there you go. I'm going to turn the debugging on, make sure it's in Python 3, and I'll put a breakpoint over here and then run it. So now it's asking for a number. So I'm going to stop here for a second to make it look neat. I'll put a space after this and put a colon here. That way, your program looks a little bit cleaner. Your output looks cleaner. Enter a number. It's asking for a number. Now, right now, the computer is executing this line over here. And whatever I'm going to type, let's say 32, whatever I'm going to type, the moment I press the enter key, whatever I type will go into that memory cell, 32. Now, computer is done with that. Now, computer moved on to the next line, and it is now computer is executing this. Basically, it's executing this right now. And let's say I type 15. What's going to happen? 15 is coming in as a text. This thing is collecting as a text. Since we wrapped it around with the int, that text is converted into a number, an integer, and it's stored in this memory cell here, right? So I'm going to press enter now. Now it stopped over here because I had put a breakpoint. You can put a breakpoint anywhere you want. So if I hover over in number 1, you see 32. If I hover over number 2, it's 15. Now, if I hover number 1, no, 32, 15. Do you think it's going to be true? Of course, 32 is bigger than 15. It's going to be true. So I'm going to expand this here. Oh, there you go. So if I step over this, you will see, there you go. It reached this. Because it is true, this condition is true, it goes over here. Right? Now it's going to check the second condition. Will this be true? Is number 2 bigger than number 1? No. As a result, it's going to skip this line. Watch here what happens. It's going to, boom, it skipped that, right? Now, is number 1 equals to number 2? No. As a result, it's going to skip line number 11 also. You see, it ended over here. So that is the output, right? It took 2 numbers and displayed the larger number is 32. So let me put one line here at the very end, just to let you know that the program is reaching over here. Thank you for using the program. So if I run through this one more time, This time I'm going to make the second number bigger. So let's say 54, enter 10. That was number one. That went into a cell called number one. And I'm going to put 76. So this will go into a cell called number two. So if you now hover over here, number two is bigger than number one. So will this condition be true? Obviously, no. It's going to skip over that. And now will the second condition be true? Yes. If we hover over number two, it is bigger than number one, so it's going to be true, right? So it'll display the larger number is 76. Is the third condition true? No. And then it skipped past the line number 11 here, and it's going to execute the last line. Thank you for using the program. So now, again, you can always test this one more time where you type these two numbers that are equal. Then you will see that the computer will execute that line. So coming to the notes here, there are a few things we understand. This is for greater than, sorry, Microsoft Word, right? Greater than, what we use that, less than, we use this. Then you use greater than or equals. Then you use this, less than or. So these are all different comparison operator. Just let me double check one more time here. Okay, that is greater than or equals to, and this is less than or equals to. And this is equals to, and you should not use a single equal sign here, right? You should always use here. If you use this, this is used for checking if the numbers are equal. So if you say if num1 equals to num2, here it checks to see if the contents of the num1 are equals to num2. Some students, some people make a mistakes here. If they forget to put another equal sign here, what does this do? It takes the value in num2 and puts it in num1. So after this, both num1 and num2 will be the same. So just be careful on that. So what we have learned so far is how to write a program finding the larger of the two numbers using simple if. So in the next video, we'll talk about finding the larger of the three numbers, and this time we will also use an AND operator. Remember, we talked about AND, or, all of that, right? So in the next video, we'll talk about how to find the larger of three numbers. In this video, we talked about two numbers. In the next one, we'll talk about how to find the largest of the three numbers. And in that example, we'll make use of this AND operator that we haven't learned so far. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.